Hi, beautiful artists. So today we are in part 2 of our beautiful little lily. I have painted these lilies before, but this one was really about these bends and curves of the leaves, which I think is so beautiful in lilies. That's one of the things I really appreciate. Excuse me. So I am going to paint that for you today. I was actually going to do a little bud here, but let's focus on this first and see how far we get with that. Pardon me for just a second. Okay, what I'm going to do first is take your drawing, if you did draw that yesterday in part 1, and I'm just going to roll over this with my kneaded eraser so I can get rid of some of the darkness in the lines. There we go. Won't do the leaves yet because, well, I guess I will. Might as well do it all since I'm here. There we go. Okay, so that lightened up considerably, but yet I still have those lines. These kneaded erasers are great for this. That way, for those of you who don't like those dark lines, this is a really great. You probably can't even hardly see that now. Okay, today I'm going to be using a couple different brushes. You can use your Dugatos. As you know, I'm always telling you about this set of Dugatos, so good for beginners because you get a whole set of them and you can try them out without having to splurge on these Princetons. I'm going to go ahead and use my Princeton Velvet Touch brush today, and then for some of the little detail lines in the petals and to get around some of these little tiny parts of the middle of the flower, stigma, stamen, so forth, I'm going to use either my Meeden little tiny brush, my little liner brush, or I shared with you the other day, I don't know, last year sometime, I bought this set on Amazon, and I don't think I shared the link with you the other day, so I'll look for that. But it's by Zen Art Supplies, and I actually liked it because it came in this fun little bamboo carrier that I could pack easily, and it actually has all kinds of fun stuff in here. So I've used a lot of that. It does have these in here too. They are called, hold on, I forget what they're called now. Let me think about it a minute. They are shapers. That's what they call them. But they're good if you did want to go into the center of your flowers and apply masking. I'm not a big masking person. I don't have a lot of good luck with it, so I don't use those. But I have her, I like it too because the company was founded by a woman and a mom. So I kind of like that. This is the they call it 4 verbena round. And it's got a really great point on it. It's a little bit soft, but that's okay. And it's got the short handle. So I'm going to use one of those for my little detail lines, but for the most part, I'll be using this. I'm also, by the way, using my MeiLang paints. If you have Winsor Newton or whatever you have, that's perfectly fine. I really like these for the amount of painting I'm doing. They're really nice and bright, and they're also very transparent, which we're going to be focusing on here. And I'm going to be working wet in wet. So I'm going to start out with just wetting my petal. And when I say that, I'm just making it damp. I don't want it to be puddly because then you have less control over your paint and your water. And for beginners, that can be really frustrating. So I'm just wetting the area here, the entire petal. So it's just shiny. No puddles sitting anywhere. And then I'm going to go in, and the colors I'm using, by the way, I kind of did this little swatch. Now this is the MeiLang colors, and you know, really choose any red, yellow, orange that you like. I will put the colors in the description, but it's basically the MeiLang palette. The red that I'm using would be the same as alizarin crimson in your Winsor Newtons, and cad yellow, cad orange, sap green, olive green, and then one of your siennas is just fine. You know, use kind of what you like. So this is wet, and before it gets too dry, just wet it a little bit here again. I'm going to go in with just the tiniest bit of paint, and I've got some paint on my palette here already with that alizarin crimson. Well, no, I'm sorry, in here it isn't called alizarin crimson. It's called, you know what? I'll look it up for you guys. But use whichever red you want, it doesn't really matter. And I'm going to go in, now remember in watercolors, we want to start with a very light wash. Now that's too much water. See how much that spread? That's too much. So I just wiped off my brush and I'm going to spread that around. Hold on, let me get my paper towel here. There we go. So I'm kind of spreading that around like so. And we're going to build layers on this, so don't worry about it being too light. In watercolors, you can always go light to dark. Matter of fact, that's kind of what you want to do. Now I'm going to add in, excuse me, a little bit of, so sorry, I've had a bit of a cough lately. If I knew how to edit, I would edit that out, guys. Okay, let me grab my yellow. I'm going to move this up so I can try and fit most of my palette in here for you. I'm going to go for that cad yellow, but a light value, meaning probably 80% water, 20% paint. And just to ensure I haven't got too much water on my brush, that's usually the problem watercolor beginners have, is I put it on my brush and then just scrape off and get that excess water off. And then I'm going to go in here and just start going in on the edge there like that. Okay, so look at that beautiful blend there. Isn't that pretty? I'm going to go in and pick up just a tiniest bit of that red. Be really careful with the red because it can be pretty potent. Anytime you're using a color, by the way, has cad in front of it, that's going to be a pretty dark, opaque color. So this is the beauty, you guys, of watercolor. Look at that. Just blends together. Now I'm going to stop there because if I work that too much, it's going to get overworked. So let's move on to our next petal here. I'm going to do the same thing. Actually, I'm going to skip one because I don't want to work right next to my wet area. So go in here, just wetting my paper. And again, this is key because too much water and you're going to have a mess. There are definitely advanced techniques of working wet and wet. I work a lot wet and wet. But for the beginner, I just don't want to give that to you and put that on your plate because it's more advanced. So damp on dry paper is much easier to work with. You're not getting paint just going out in a huge pool. Now, I'm going to pick up some of that red paint and making sure I haven't got too dark of a value. If you're not sure, just take one of your little swatches. I cut up these papers all the time and just test it out. And make sure it's not too dark in value. And now I'm going to go in and do the same thing I did there. Let me turn my paper here. So see how that really spread out? That's because I have too much water on my brush. So just tap that off. And then pick up a little bit more of that paint. And we definitely can get darker here as we go. We'll keep putting down more and more washes. Right now, this is just the first wash. Make sure too, all of your lines, your brush strokes are going in towards the center of your flowers so your flower doesn't look wonky. Now I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of that yellow and hit the middle with that. And these are going to blend into a beautiful gold and some oranges. So pretty. Might just add in a tiny bit more red. You can always go darker, friends. It's very difficult in watercolors to go lighter. You can always add layers and go darker. There we go. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. I could almost go in there and add a little more yellow, but I don't want to keep working that. So I'm going to go to my next petal. Sorry, hopefully not making you guys dizzy there. And I'm going to wet this one. Oop, my palette just closed. So again, watch that water control. And I'm going around all my little stamens, stigmas, all those kind of fun things. I have no puddle at all. It's just shiny. I likened this the other day in one of my classes to a kitchen sponge. If you are wiping off your counter, you want it to be plenty wet, but not leave any puddles behind. I don't know if that helps you guys. Sometimes I come up with some kind of funky metaphors. You know what? I just noticed my microphone isn't plugged in. Let me plug that in for you guys. Hold on here. Let's see. I swear, once a newbie, always a newbie, huh? Okay, let me get this a little bit wet again. So I was talking about the old kitchen sponge there. I kind of liken it to that. You wipe off your counter and you're just leaving a damp surface. You don't want puddles, right? This is the same type of thing. Okay, then I'm going to go in with a tiny bit of my red. Just barely putting any on the tip of my brush. And that very light value. I'm going to rinse my brush and pick up a tiny, tiny bit of that yellow. Oops, see, that's way too intense. So I just wiped my brush off a bit. And there we go. I could put a tiny bit more of that red on the outer. There we go. Okay, so see those beautiful blends? Now this one should be about dry, so I think I'll go ahead and go into this petal here. And if I can find my eraser here, I'm going to erase that and use my brush to remove those little eraser pieces. And let's go ahead and go into this one. And before I do that, I want to draw one more That's the big one that comes out. Now those are a little bit darker. There we go. These things are a lifesaver, I tell you guys. Okay, let's go in and get this damp. So I'm just getting some water on my brush. And you can, by the way, like I said, you can mask out the little stamens here. That's completely up to you. I don't usually, because I'm just not a masking user. Don't do it. I don't know why. I think it got drilled into my head when I was in college, and we were not allowed to show up with anything other than our paper, our Winsor Newton, our Arches paper, by the way, which for a student, that was kind of pricey paper. They weren't messing around. And my paint, paper, and brush, and that was it. That was all you were allowed to walk into that room with. I'm going to add a tiny bit more water up here. There we go. Okay, now pick up the red and start going in here. Go around this little guy. Again, if you wanted to mask those out, you certainly could if you don't like having to go around those things. I just, for some reason, I've never been able to work with that masking. Okay, now I'm going to wash and rinse my brush and go into that yellow again and start feathering that out using very light pressure. I want to use the point of my brush, so I'm holding my brush straight up and down. There we go. Okay. Let's go ahead and go to this one. So we're going to wet our paper again. Use that tip of my brush. Move all this paint around. By the way, I'm going to be doing a class on negative painting, which is what I'm doing right now. I'm painting around those. So it's kind of reminds me of the same principle as that. Okay. And now let's go in with that beautiful red color. And you see that actually was a little drier, which is why it's a little bit more vibrant. And not as feathery looking. Pick up some of my yellow. We're just repeating the same thing. And I know this looks really light right now, but we will be adding in more layers. There we go. So this will get richer and darker. There we go. Okay. Let's go to our last leaf here. Yeah, petal, not leaf. And we're going to wet that, go around this little guy. So relaxing, isn't it? Watercolors are really relaxing for me to watch. Even sometimes my own, I mute my voice because I never like listening to myself. Then I hear all my mistakes too. Okay, I'm picking up some of that red. And laying that down very lightly. And now with the yellow, I actually ran out of yellow. Let me grab a little bit there. It's very watered down though. There we go. If you think you might have too much water, just see how much came off there and just see how much. You don't want it to spread that much, or I don't. Again, that is a technique, but not the beginner's technique I want to share with you guys, because that is a lot harder to control. There we go. And I'm just going to soften that line tiny bit. So this is very pale right here. This is our first glaze, our first value. There you go. All right, now we're going to get darker and darker and darker. Okay. If you're in doubt, so for here right now, it's pretty cool out. So I want to just hit this really quickly with my little heat gun. Make sure it's dry. And I'm going to go in for another glaze. There we go. I want to really take time with this because I think I'm going to try that Zen Art brush actually. And go in and just add a tiny bit more. I'm going to darken this glaze now. So I'm picking up that red. And we'll see how dark that is right now. And I'm going to go in and just lay down another coat here. I wanted to have a little bit more of those lines in there. That's why I didn't wet my paper first. And then let's go in with that yellow. There we go. Just softening the edges with a damp brush. Going to get a little more of that red. Keep feathering that in. Yeah, I kind of like this brush. Their brushes are very soft as well. So they're pretty easy to work with. Let me get a little bit more of that red paint. I'm working with so little here. There we go. Just really taking my time. Which, guys, to be honest, I don't usually work very slow. I'm kind of a impatient painter. Just going to get a little bit of water. But I really wanted to get, I'm going to wipe up that a little bit, this glow, because I just think that's so beautiful. And then I need to walk away from that because I don't want to add too much. I just picked up a little bit of orangey, cad orange and yellow. Let me pick up a tiny bit, just the tip of my brush. Ooh, that was quite potent. And feathering that in. There we go. Okay. Now, one thing I would like to do is just go around the edge a little and add in some more of that red. So look at that beautiful blend there. Oh, love that. I'm going to leave that just like it is. Let's go on to our next leaf, which is right here, because I don't want to work in the one right next to it. And I'm again going to go in with that red and start laying it down. Don't want to get too dark. That's a little dark. Let's see how we do. You can use your test paper if you need to. So before this dries too much, I want to go around the edge with just a damp brush and blend that in before it dries. With damp and damp, wet and damp, you have to work a little bit quickly, guys, because once it starts drying, you start getting those blooms and blossoms and cauliflower. So you have to work a bit quick here. I'm blending out my brush stroke lines. This is where detail work is not my favorite thing, but I'm going to go in and put a little bit more of that red on my brush. Just the tiniest bit. Ooh, that was really dark, so I'm going to try and pick some of that up with a damp, clean brush. I'm not going to freak out because that might look okay. And I'm keeping all of this, I just keep working into it so I can keep it all the same wetness, because as soon as you create more wetness in an area than you're going into with your brush is when, again, you get those cauliflowers and those kind of funky things that you might not want. There you go. Just cleaning up that outer line. Quite liking this though. Okay, this is where sometimes you just gotta stop. Of course I'm not. There we go. So we've got a beautiful blend. I could have added more yellow in that leaf, but I don't want to keep going. Aside from, I am going to just fix this little line on the outside. There we go. Okay, let's go to our next petal here. So I'm not working the petals right next to each other. And just start going in. You want all your petals to be going back to the center of the flower. Then wash and rinse your brush so it's just damp, and I start smoothing out those edges. Now I'll go into my yellow and feather in. A little bit more red, so I'm kind of going back and forth between my red and my yellow. And doing all of this while it's the same amount of dampness, which can kind of be tricky sometimes, and why you have to work just a tiny bit fast. Now, at the end of your stroke, if you don't like that explosion, just rinse and wipe off your brush and just smooth it out like that. Okay, I'm going to go in with a tiny bit of yellow. Pick up a little bit more. I'm just using so little paint, you guys. Like the smallest amount. And adding that in. Let me grab a little bit more red. This is the first time I think I've actually used this brush this much. I wanted to challenge myself, and you know, I laugh because I always do this when I'm in a live or showing you something, and I always think, oh my word, if this is a fail, this is going to be really embarrassing. So there you go. Isn't that lovely? You guys, that right there is truly why I love watercolors. I know I say that all the time, but I just, there's no words for me with watercolors. So if, I'm not sure if you can see the paint I'm mixing, I put some in there and then I add water till I get the color I want, the value I want. And then I tap my brush off to get that excess water out. Go onto your paper towel, and now we go back in, and this is where, you know, I can see the value of masking because it's taking me a little bit of time to go around the little areas in the middle there, and because I'm having to take my time, I could see that the paint might dry a little bit too much. Now I'm just going around with a damp brush. There we go. And now clean, rinse my brush and pick up some of that yellow, and I got to work kind of quick here, because again, we want this to blend, and because I had to take a little bit of time to go around those, I wasn't able to quite get to the paint before it dried a little bit more than I wanted it to, but that's okay. Again, you know, this is fun, you guys. I don't want this to be stressful for you. Because, you know what? I don't want to be stressed these days. I want to do what I love and enjoy it. I'm just dabbing into that red paint. Maybe my palette a little bit right here. This Zen brush, by the way, really has such a great point on it and is so flexible. I normally don't like this soft of brushes because they hold too much water, but I'll tell you, because I'm using this small brush, it really is just perfectly fine. Pick up some more of that yellow. And then I'm going to stop on this one because I don't want it to get too muddied up here. There we go. Okay, so there you've got that beautiful blend there. And watercolors always dries much lighter. So look at how light this dried. So keep that in mind when you're painting. It's always going to dry much lighter than it looks. And then I'm just damp brush, go around. I had too much water there. And soften all these lines because I do not like lines. And it is interesting, this brush, because it holds so much water, I'm having to keep dabbing it off, but it's a wonderful brush. It's just I'm not used to using a softer brush. So I tend to load my brush, but this one really soaks it up, which can be a good thing. A lot of people really like that, and I'm actually just fine with that. Okay. Now again, if you do not like all those little kind of hairy, I don't know what else to call them, those little explosions, you can go in before it dries with a rinsed damp brush, but you've wiped it off, and just go around and smooth them out. Just with a thirsty, damp brush. Now I want to add a little more yellow in there. So I'm going to pick up some of my yellow. Not too wet, because that's when you will totally lose control of your painting as a beginner. And there we go. Okay. So we're getting darker and darker, and you know, one of the things that's so beautiful about watercolors is that transparency and the glazes. It's so beautiful because you see the previous layers that shine through and they blend together, and it's just so beautiful. That's a little bit too dark, I had a feeling. Okay. So I'm just repeating this kind of over and over. Now this is the one that I need to work a little faster because I'm having to go around the little doodads in the middle there. So I have to work a little bit quicker so it doesn't dry. I'm going to wash and rinse my brush, damp brush, not wet, and go around and quickly start blending those edges. You know what, you guys, I actually really am liking this brush. Kind of surprised. See, this is why I like to try new things, because sometimes I'm like, wow, I can't believe I didn't do this years ago or didn't try this. I went through phase when I got out of college, which is eons ago, because you guys, I'm no spring chicken. And I just always stuck with what they told me to buy and how they told me to do things in college, which is so really not me. I don't know why. Like they said, use Winsor Newton paints. And that was all I used until even the last few years. And I have found so many great paints, and I'm like, my gosh, I had no clue there was all these beautiful paints out here. Even the, the MeiLang that I share with you guys, like, I would have never tried that a few years ago. I'd have been like, oh no, my teacher told me to use Winsor Newton. I am using Winsor Newton. And I think, I probably missed out on a lot of fun, different techniques and paints. But that's why I'm loving you guys so much, because you asked me about things, and that's really great. Okay, so there you go. We've got that beautiful blend. Look at how pretty that flower is. Now, we haven't done these little folded over pieces, which is why I originally did this video, because one of you asked me about that. So let's see, what am I going to mix for that? I think I'm going to mix some of my red, and then let's mix in a tiny bit of, let's see, blue. It's going to create like a purple, but yet a shadowy purple. And then I might even add in a little bit of green. Yeah, that's kind of what I was looking for. And go in and let's paint that little folded over petal here. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to add a touch of this red and orange to that as a layer, as a glaze. It's getting a little bit light. Let me make a little bit more. So I did red. I did some of my Payne's gray. Didn't quite want that purpley color though, so I added some green. And it really made it a nice shadowy color. There we go. Okay. Wash, rinse my brush so it's barely damp, and just soften that edge. Take a tiny bit more, because it's going to be darkest where it just is coming out from underneath the flower, right? And there we go. And then I'm going to go back in and add some red to that. So I feel like I want to add some tiny, tiny lines. So let's do, I'm going to take my red that we've been using, but I want to add, let's see, I'm going to add a little brown to it. See what we get with that. Let's see here. I'm just really kind of playing with these colors here. There we go. I'm going to add a tiny bit. Let's see, what other color can we use here? I just play because I'm not even sure what color I want. So just play with your colors. If you add in opposites, keep in mind it's going to turn kind of a muddy color. So just remembering that. And then let's go in and draw in some tiny lines. Now I am using like the lightest touch with my brush. I'm almost not touching the paper. And I'm going to do this two ways because I'm kind of playing here. So I did that. And now I'm kind of going over with a damp brush and going to soften those lines. And then I'm going to try it again so you can see the difference. And I'm going to do a little bit more like wet and wet for those lines. And let's kind of, you know, play like that and see what you get. So this time I did the lines and then went over it with a very damp brush. Let's do this, and I don't want to do that one because that has too many little doohickeys in there. But let's barely dampen this. And this is dry, by the way, I hope. So I'm just don't go over this too much because you'll start moving that paint around. We don't want to do that. And then I'm going to go in with my darker color and the very tip, light pressure. And let's start creating some of these little lines. And you can see the difference here. There we go. The main thing is, so when you go wet into wet, it's going to be a lot softer. I kind of like going wet into dry first. Let me do that again, just so you can see. I like doing these different ways, so you can kind of decide what you like. Let's do this one. So here is wet into dry, which, by the way, wet into dry has a very, very, if you notice, hard line, very detailed. Now I'm going to go over with just a damp brush. You don't want it wet. This is just my preferred way, but I'm showing you both ways so you can play with this and kind of decide what you like best. I'm going to add in a tiny bit of yellow there. There we go. Love that golden yellow. I think that's really pretty. So there you go. You've got a few different choices there. Okay, let's go over these shadow parts with some of our red. There we go. So I'm glazing over them with the same color as the petal. So there you go. Okay, so it looks like the petal has a shadow on it. We could have even painted the red petal first and then went in with the shadow color. And I just want to barely tap in so that where the leaf is just starting to fold, it's going to be the darkest, right? So we just, as that's still wet, tap in a little. And it gives it that feeling of There. Hopefully you can see that. All right, now we can just keep going here. I'm going to do one more glaze. Let's see how many minutes we're at here. I can't read my little thing, but I'm going to go in with that red one more time and add in some more fine lines here, and then I'm going to go over it with my damp brush. So rinse your brush and then wipe it off, because if it's too wet, you're going to remove all of those lines. We just want to softly blend them. Just building layers, getting darker and richer and more beautiful every time. Now before that dries, I want to go into that center with some yellow. There we go. And then wash and rinse my brush and blend out any of those little edges. You can use a little bit more of those lines. Just using the very tip of this beautiful brush. You're definitely going to see me use this more. I've had this brush for a year. I don't know why I haven't used it. And there we go. I think I'm about done. I mean, I could really just keep going over and deepening and darkening these layers, but I want to get a little darker on the inside. So I'm going to grab some of my red and some of my Payne's blue and make this really nice, yummy color inside. And you know what I think I may do is, I think I'm going to get the inside wet. Don't want to drop, because I want this to be very soft inside. So I'm putting my water down just damp, going around all these fun little pieces, and then I'll go in with that dark color and just tap in, and we'll get that beautiful blend. By the way, if you would like this drawing, just email me. I don't know why I couldn't get it to load onto my, maybe I'll try again, my website for some reason. I've just got a damp brush here and I'm feathering that out. So look at that, how much depth that created. It just draws your eye right into the middle. So let's do that again. I'm going to get this wet. And then go in with that dark color. Wash, rinse my brush. Just make it damp and kind of pull that out. And it just draws your eye into that center so beautifully. It makes it so interesting. Now, keeping in mind, this is going to dry lighter. Let's just keep going around. Wet the inside. Go in, grab some of that paint, that dark paint. I grab a little bit more here. And go in. Now I had quite a bit on my brush there, a little bit more than I wanted. So see how much harder that is to control? While I'm painting here, I can hear a frog in my backyard. How funny is that? We don't normally get frogs, so these are the little distractions I get when I'm doing these for you guys. So this is a really subtle little addition I'm doing right here. But sometimes those are the things that the eye will pick up. Where'd my color go? Here it is. Add a little bit more red to that. I feel like I need a little bit darker. It's almost like a purple. Now I've got a squirrel outside my window, you guys. They are all trying to distract me, I think. So funny. There's a squirrel here eating a little nut while I'm painting. Okay, wash rinse my brush. And yes, you guys, squirrels and frogs, you are distracting me. Okay, so there we go. Look how pretty. I could go on and on here actually, you guys, and I'm trying to keep this video to a decent amount of time for you guys, so it's not too crazy. But gosh, it's so hard because I could just do this all day long. You guys are like, oh, great. I can't. I've got work and food and feed my kids and stuff, right? I get it, you guys. Totally get it. I wake up in the middle of the night doing this stuff. Okay. So I felt like I wanted to do that with the tip of that petal. Oops. And I might go in afterwards and just do some more of that, just to create that feeling of the petal is turning. So this is that push-pull technique I tell you about. Just adding some of that darkness to the outer edge. And then use a damp, clean brush and just feather it out like that. I love that technique. For me, it's kind of quick and dirty, right? There we go. So you could go through and do, because look at how light this edge is here. Hopefully I haven't lost you guys by now. Really go in with like a dark value and then just feather it out. Wash and rinse your brush so you have a clean brush and feather it out. I just love that look. Oh my gosh, you guys, this is comedy. These birds and goings on looking inside my window here at me. It's like Mother Nature has conspired with them to see if they can all distract me. Okay, let's go in and I'm going to use, let's see, I think I will use the sap green like I have on my page here, my little swatch sheet. And I love tree green. That's like my fave. The beautiful thing is too, Mother Nature's so amazing, is red and green are complementary colors. So look how beautiful red and green are together. Don't you love that? I could honestly kind of geek out on what I'm doing here, but I'm trying to keep this tutorial in a decent amount of time. Wish I could see how much time we've got here. Oh my goodness. Okay, so we're at an hour. So I think I just want to stop there, and tomorrow we'll come back and we will just paint the stem and the leaves here. Otherwise, you guys are just going to be like, my gosh, is she ever going to stop talking? Last one. There we go. Just feathering that out a little bit. And you could do that on all those edges. All right. Oh, you know what? We forgot the little things in the middle there. Let's do those in like in orange. And just little dots. I think they're kind of like a mustardy color. Just using the very tip of my brush. Let's maybe even add a little brown. There we go. Just to give a little depth. Okay, there we go. Let's come back tomorrow and we will finish off that stem. All right, everybody, thanks for your patience and thanks for being here. I hope you were able to grasp, you know, some of the techniques I used there, and let's come back and finish this in the next one. Okay, thanks everybody. Bye.